for joining me. I'm going to talk about a suicide prevention program or ministry that I've created that can be implemented in the church. Right off the bat, I want to sort of back up and talk about the fact that the very first question I usually get is, well, don't you have to be a licensed therapist to get involved in these programs? And the truth is no. Yes, if you're working in therapy, but I've designed this program where you don't need to be licensed. It's important to be trained, but you don't have to be a licensed therapist to do this program. And that was the beauty of this ministry that I put together. So I want to start with the statistics. This program can be utilized for any age group. I target youth because that's the passion that I have, but you can obviously implement this at any stage of life. One of the more disturbing statistics is that suicide is the second leading cause of death in the United States for youth ages 5 to 21. The first leading cause of death is motor vehicle accidents. So what does that mean? It means that the top two causes of death that we lose our children to are completely preventable situations. It's not cancer, it's not anything that is a disease, it is preventable situations. The church in the United States, or in general, has historically stayed out of suicide. There have been some programs that have popped up over the years, but historically we've stayed out of it. All current programs, over the last 10 years, I've been studying programs from around the world. I've looked at programs from South America, I've looked at programs in Europe, I've looked at programs in Asia. And what I've learned is that all of the programs that are available are reactive, not proactive. The programs are designed to target people or individuals or children after they've been identified as suffering from suicidal ideation, depression, or anxiety. This program that I've created is proactive. It's designed to be implemented immediately. One other statistic I want to push out there, because second leading cause of death is one thing, but I think numbers really tell us a true story. On average, according to CDC and NIMH, 154 youth in the United States per day attempt suicide. Per day. And I think that's an extremely disturbing number, because a lot of people hear, oh, it's 11 per 100,000 that succeeded suicide every year. But you never hear about the kids that tried and didn't, by a miracle of God, did not succeed. So I want to throw this out because I think it's important to push out the why. Like, why is this program so important to our ministry? Why is the church responsible? Jesus says, everyone knows this verse, we're all clergy, we've all studied the Bible. Love your neighbor as yourself. Look at the last line. These two commandments. I don't see two commandments when I look at this. I see three. I see three commandments. I see love your neighbor as yourself. Love God is obviously the first. Love Jesus. Love him with all your heart, with all your soul. But love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus is saying here, we cannot love our neighbor if we do not love ourselves. The backbone, the cornerstone of my program is that line. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. My program. It's two phases. The first is understanding spiritual self-care. You can start teaching this as young as you want. Age 5 is my preference. You can meet a kid that can sit through a class, and before that, go for it. But understanding spiritual self-care, that's phase 1. Phase 2, becoming a gatekeeper. Who are gatekeepers? Gatekeepers are our teachers, they're our counselors, they're our pastors, they're our priests, they're our bishops. They're all adults. Why can't our kids be gatekeepers? And I'll get into why I believe the kids can be gatekeepers in a minute. So lesson 1. Teach how Jesus practiced self-care. This is just one of many examples in the Bible of Jesus practicing self-care. His disciples were overwhelmed. They had a long day. He took them back, a solitary place, and told them to, relax, rest, find peace. He's practicing self-care. I've heard a lot from individuals, from groups, from cultures. I've read online, self-care is selfish. We shouldn't go after that. You need to take care of other people. Well, something that's really come to light in the last, I'd say, decade or so, is you can't take care of other people if you don't take care of yourself. Jesus practiced self-care. We should be encouraging this. And this is the first lesson. Again, when I teach this to kids, it's over a long period of time. I did rushing because it's an hour, but when you teach this to kids, this is a whole day, or a whole lesson, right? This isn't just me rushing through one. We're going through different Bible verses. We're going through the different sections. We're talking about this. We're discussing, what is self-care to you? What does that look like? So, yes, I summed this up in 5 minutes, but this is a whole day. This is a whole Sunday school lesson. Understanding self-care. What is spiritual self-care? So when you talk about self-care to the general public, people lift stuff things like take a bubble bath, read a book. These are all great. Those are all self-care. But when I'm talking about spiritual self-care, I'm talking about something deeper than that. I'm talking about taking time for self-care for the connection to God. And we don't teach that in our schools. We teach Bible verses. We teach memorization. We teach, policies. We don't teach our kids how to connect to God. That's what spiritual self-care is. You're connecting yourself to God. Why is it important to teach children and youth? I think that's pretty self-explanatory. We grow up, we don't talk about mental health to kids, we don't talk about spiritual self-care to kids, and then we expect them to deal with the high stressors of being an adult. And they're not equipped, they're not ready for it. That's why we need to teach this. The church, we're responsible for the people that come to us. We're responsible for their self-care, we're responsible for their spiritual journey. And this is part of that. When should we practice self-care? In my opinion, at least 30 minutes every day. And I'll get into more detail on that a little bit. I know some people think that's unrealistic, so for the most part I'll tell people maybe 3 days a week. Pick a couple of times. People are like, I don't have time. How often do you watch television? That hour after dinner that you're sitting in front of the TV, 30 minutes of that can be spent connecting with God. So different types of self-care. Again, when you're teaching this to your youth group or your children's group, each one of these, you'll take the time to go through them every week. Some of them you may have to double up and do it another week. But I'm going to really quickly just run through a brief explanation of each. So, conversational prayer, what does that look like, right? Just talking to God by yourself, not in a room full of people, not with an audience, not with other people. You're just by yourself in your, I used to go and hide in the closet for my self-care. We lived in a small apartment because I have children. That was my location that I could get those moments of quiet. So wherever you find that space, that is your space. And that conversation with God is not, you can ask Him for forgiveness for what happened that day, but it's talking to Him, it's unloading, it's venting. We do the same thing with our therapists, we do the same thing with family members, but now do it to God. Tell Him what's on your mind. What is bothering you? Conversational prayer. Devotional meditation. It's very similar. You're sitting in a quiet space, in a comfortable position, and you're just breathing. You're listening to your breath, and you're waiting for God to speak to you. And you can do more than one of these, right? You can combine them, you can mix them up. Visual meditation, similar again. This one you typically have a visual representation, maybe a cross, maybe some incense, maybe some essential oils. Spiritually walk. We have a labyrinth outside. How many people walked that? Anyone? I did. Kids love this one. You have a child in your ministry that has ADHD, that is an amazing one to do with those kids because they don't sit still very well. And that one, it gets them to focus and move at the same time. So they move through these labyrinths and you just say, breathe in, breathe out, and follow the line and just continue that pattern. And they're focusing on the breathing, and they're focusing on staying in the lines, and they're making a spiritual walk. And in those moments, you'll watch it. You'll watch them calm down. You'll watch them focus. And it's a beautiful thing. Creative spirituality. They make Bibles now with coloring books inside of them. You know, I don't like to color particularly. I find it very tedious. I don't know why. But I know people that love it and find it very, very focusing. And it's a great way. You read a Bible verse, and then while you're contemplating the Bible verse, you focus your energy, you color in the pages, and you can focus on that Bible verse. It's all about finding your focus. Christian yoga, when I teach this one, I bring someone in because I don't do yoga. I'm not great at it, but again, another form of meditation and movement. You're moving, you're thinking, you're focusing. Deep listening. I love this one. I love this one because so many people, particularly I've noticed from my generation, we have a lot of negative things that come through our head. So God will say, start that church. God will say, open that campground. Go to that campground. Be a part of that. And then there will be doubt. Immediately following that, oh, I'm not qualified. So many times I said that to myself every time I come up to do this speech. I'm not qualified. I can't do this. That's not God. God is the first voice. God is the voice that's telling you to go and do. That is God. The voices after that, that's negativity. Those are your demons. Those are your personal thoughts. Deep listening is learning to separate those. Sitting in a meditative state and separating yourself from the negative thoughts and focusing just on what God says. Write it down. Write down the positive thoughts. Every time a positive thought or an action pops in your head, write it down. It's a form of self-care because you're talking to God. In those moments, you are listening to what He has to say. Self-writing practice. I love doing this one with kids, and I want to take a moment to ask if anybody wants to participate, you can. I took a Reiki course, a 6-month course, and I know that Reiki is often a secular practice, but there are a lot of Christian values and interpretations that can be said to it. And one of the things I love about Reiki is it focuses on your aura, it focuses on your energy, it focuses on your spirituality. And so if you'll join me, one thing I would like you all to do, if you can, if you would like, you're going to take your hands, you're going to put them together like this. This is one of the very first things I'll teach you in Reiki, because it shows the energy, it shows you your energy. You're going to rub them together as fast as you can. Your hands are going to get really hot. And when you're ready, you're going to stop and you're going to slowly pull apart. And you're going to feel that energy. When you feel that pressure, that's your energy. And with kids, it doesn't always work the first time. With kids, you'll have them like form balls, and they get so excited about this. And the reason that kids get so excited about this, and I heard it the other day in one of our other classes, is kids are, or in one of our other group discussions, kids are more receptive, I believe, to that spirit. They're more receptive to that energy, to that aura, than we are as adults. And so with Reiki self-practice, it's taking that energy, it's doing that exercise, and it's focusing it, and it's realizing their own power. It's really empowering to do these with kids. So these are just some of the ways you can do spiritual self-care with children. And like I said, one of the reasons that I think this is so important is because we don't teach it to our children. And this helps equip them for the future. So the next section is becoming a gatekeeper. So again, a gatekeeper in society, they're your counselors, they're your teachers, they're your pastors. The gatekeeper is the individual who, knows how to respond to somebody who says they're suicidal. A lot of people veer away from the idea that kids can be gatekeepers. I don't, and here's the reason why. When a youth or a child is experiencing suicidal ideation, you are not the first person they're going to tell. I'm sorry, but we're adults. They are not going to come to us first. they're going to tell their friends. Subtle, little side comments, sometimes very aggressive, but they're going to tell their peers before they tell you. And it'll be the peer, 9 times out of 10, that will come and tell you. So what do? We teach them how to deal with that. We teach them what to do. We don't say, oh, go find an adult. Kids aren't always going to do that. And we see that in the statistics and the numbers that we went over. Being a gatekeeper doesn't mean they're a licensed therapist. It doesn't mean they're going to sit down and give their friends therapy every week or anything to that effect. It just means we're giving them the tools to deal with it. If a friend comes to them and says, I'm thinking about killing myself. I'm thinking about suicide. If I'm 12, what do I do with that? I'm 10, 7. Your brother comes to you and says, I just want to die. Think about yourself at 9. Would you have been able to handle that? What would you have done with that information? You might have gone to tell an adult. You might have thought it was a joke. We need to equip our kids to be ready for those answers. What age can someone become a gatekeeper? In my opinion, I would start at age 10. I wouldn't go much lower than that. Just maturity level-wise, it makes it a little bit more difficult to teach. But I would start at age 10. I already went over why it's important. How does this translate to the church? Okay. Again, as a gatekeeper, as a pastor, I'm going to tell a story, a personal story, and I think this will help a little bit. When I was a youth pastor, a long time ago, for one of the churches, I had a girl come to me, and she told me that she was suicidal. I had just finished seminary. I knew the book. I knew that process. I knew what I had to do. I sat her down and we had a discussion. We talked about it. I asked to invite her parents in. We talked about it. Social worker got involved. State she got therapy. A few months later, she killed herself. Does that system work? Did I get to her in time? She told a friend. The friend told no one. So, here's the program. So, lesson 1. Symptoms of suicidal ideation. You're going to talk to the kids about this. It's going to be a hard subject to broach. Kids don't want to necessarily feel like there is an end. But it's an important subject to talk about. So you're going to talk about suicide, and you're going to talk about the symptoms. And these are this is a very brief list of the symptoms. Are they talking about suicide? They have severe personality changes. With youth, you want to talk to them about the fact that this isn't just, the kid that went to parties and was super outgoing and one day shut themselves in their room. It can go the other way around. Once somebody decides that they're going to kill themselves, you'll have somebody who is very introverted, suddenly very outgoing. They're going out and they're partying, they're getting their last days in. The mood swings, the personality changes can go in either direction. Do they have a preoccupation with death, dying, and violence? Have they mentioned feeling trapped or hopeless? Are they doing risky behavior? Are they giving away their belongings? Are they saying goodbye to people in a permanent way? So is your friend coming up to you and saying, it was great knowing you, I really love you, gives you a big hug, and you're like thinking, I'm going to see you tomorrow in class, buddy, I don't understand what's going on here. That's a very big sign there that something's going on. So these are the signs. Lesson 2 will be discussing suicide. Be direct. You don't want to beat around the bush when you're talking about suicide. Are you thinking about suicide? I'd like to try an exercise. If everyone can turn to somebody, and I want you to look them directly in the eye, and I want you to say to them, are you thinking about suicide? And be very, very direct.
Are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about suicide? Are you
a little silly. They're children, that's okay. And honestly, make levity of it, makes it a little easier for them to learn, right? You don't want to be too serious all the time with kids. So it's okay if they laugh, but continue the exercise. Next, you're going to ask about the plan. This one I emphasize because there is dismissal in this step, a lot of dismissal. Do you have a plan? If they say no, do not stop talking. Just because they do not have a plan today does not mean they will not have a plan tomorrow. Do not dismiss that. I took a class a few years ago, and they said if they don't have a plan, that means that they're not actually thinking about suicide, they're looking for attention. I've heard that from so many people. That is not a thing. It is not normal for someone to be contemplating suicide. Full stop. Do you have a plan? If they say yes, that's what it is. Where are they going to get these materials? Are they going to take all of their mom's antidepressants? Okay. Write it down or make a mental note. Because when you do get the authorities involved, when you do get the parents involved, when you do get someone involved, they're going to want to know what was the plan. And they're going to want to help mitigate that. There are so many ways that you can commit suicide. Hangings, your father's neckties, overdose, your mom's depression, antidepressants, slitting your wrists, kitchen knife. I mean, your house is a walking hazard for suicide. But if you know what their plan is, you know where they're headed. Ask about the plan. Lesson 3, steps away from having that discussion and moves into discussing suicide. And we'll go back to having that discussion because there is a third step to that, but it's also a second step to this. So you'll step away from that, you'll talk about talking someone down. What if you're in your house? This is a scenario I use with my kids. You're in the house, and your brother, who's 12 years old, is in the bathroom. You accidentally walk in on him. And your brother is trying to get their mom's pill bottle open. What are you doing? You ask. The brother says, I just want to die. This is how I'm going to do it. What do you do? What if your brother's in charge of it? What if he's babysitting? Your parents aren't out of the house. What do you do in this situation if you're younger than or older even? And you don't know what you're going to do? You're not prepared. You're not equipped to answer these questions. This is what you do. The very first thing you're going to do is you're going to call 911. That is the full stop, very first thing these kids will do. They need to call 911. While 911 is getting there, because it can take anywhere from 2 to 20 minutes for 911, depending on where you live, to get to, maybe even more in some of the rural areas, get them talking. And don't talk while they're talking. So, what do I mean by that? Start talking about what's going on in your life. Once they start talking, let them talk. Don't ask questions. Don't interrupt them. Don't try to overshadow them with a story of your own. Don't try to relate to them. Just listen. Listen to what they have to say and keep them calm. Because if they're talking, they're not taking these pills. They're not tying that tie around their neck. They're not doing any of that if they're talking. Keep them talking. If you walk in on them and they've already taken the pills, it's still important. As long as they're talking, they're awake, they're alive, they're there. Keep them talking until services get there. This I emphasize on a very high level with kids. If you do not succeed in saving that person's life, it is not your fault. You tried. The key to this class is we as adults are equipping our children, our youth, with the tools that they need to at least try. Because if a child tries, they're far less likely to blame themselves in the future than if they didn't know what to do. Kid runs out of there, oh, I don't want to get involved, I don't know what's going on. That kid's more likely to blame themselves in the future because they did nothing. In this case, we equipped them with that. We equipped them with the ability to do something. Lesson 4, after the first two steps, with someone's been identified as thinking about committing suicide, have them create a SAFE plan. Step 1 in the SAFE plan, list reasons for living. 3, and I'll tell you why 3 is important in a minute. You're going to list 3 reasons for living. What are your 3 most important reasons? You're going to list 3 trusted contacts. Why 3? Studies have shown that children that do the best in life have had 3 points of contact in society. They've had someone at home, they've had someone in a structured system, and someone in an unstructured system. Home is obvious. It's usually a parent, it's hopefully a parent, sometimes a guardian, sometimes a grandparent, maybe not in the home physically, but somebody in the family that they can turn to. Structured, school, church. That's where we fall in. We could be that trusted contact. Unstructured is a friend. It's a peer that they can turn to when they need help. Kids who are the most successful in life have 3 points of contact. It's like climbing. If you've ever gone climbing, they tell you always have 3 points of contact, 2 feet on the ground and 1 on the wall. 3 points of contact. And then make a future commitment. I'm going to see you all tomorrow at church. I just made a future commitment. You will see me there, and make them write it down. Commit to seeing them the next day. Because what you're doing is you're committing them to another way of life. Practical application, just because of how of time. I was going to have each of you guys write down your SAFE plan. I would just encourage you to take the time to practice this and just go through the motions of it so that when you instruct children to do it, you kind of know what that's like. To sit there and kind of try to think, okay, where are my points of contact in life? Who are those people that I could reach out to? For a kid, put yourself in your shoes as a child. Think about your childhood, whatever it was, whether it was traumatic or safe or whatever. Put yourself in your shoes as a child and think about it. Did you have those points of contact? Can you think about those points of contact? If a child comes to you and says, I don't have 3 points of contact, a lot of kids in our country don't have someone at home. That's probably one of the hardest things to hear. Give them your name, and then give them a number for someone else in the church. Now they have 2 points of contact. Because the reality is if a child doesn't have someone at home that they can turn to, they need that extra space. For me, growing up, the church was my safe space. And it honestly didn't even matter what church. I didn't have a special relationship with any of my pastors growing up. I just felt safe with Jesus. And I turned to the Methodist church, I went to Baptist churches, I went to Lutheran churches, because the denomination didn't matter. It was the feeling that closeness when I didn't feel safe. Lesson 4, provide the resources available. This will be different no matter where, regardless of where you are. So if you're in South America, if you're in Texas, if you're in Tennessee, if you're in Maryland, if you're in upstate New York, these are your resources available. What is free to kids? What can they go do without their parents' permission? Who can they talk to? Because some parents brush this off. Oh, my kid's just over dramatic. I hear that all the time. No child is that overly dramatic. Find out who they can talk to. Who can they go to, and it be anonymous. And then always provide yourself as a resource. And when you're teaching this class, you're providing these resources to the kids, so I recommend making handouts that you can give to them, that they can give out to other kids. Because again, you're equipping them with the resources that they need to be gatekeepers. And that concludes my brief. Does anybody have questions?
Well, what do you do? Do you end up counseling kids who are survivors of a suicide? Not the ones, but the friends who have survived? And is that part of, I guess, the extended program?
I have worked with some kids who have had experience with friends either attempting or succeeding in suicide. We no longer use the word committing because it makes it sound like it's some type of crime. So we say succeeding in suicide. But I have worked with those kids. Those are some of the kids that I still meet with through Zoom. But my intent for this program is that it's implemented sort of like a Sunday school class. We start teaching it at a young age. There's an instruction manual for teachers, and my intent is not to seek out the kids. My intent is to equip them before I need to seek them out. That's my intent for this program.
I just got introduced to something called like making a facility a safe space, where it has like a sign, and Mission of the Dirt Road, which is in Keystone, where parishes, they just designated that as a safe space, and the woman came, and I was there when she explained it. It was pretty brief, so I don't know a lot about it, and I'm kind of in it. I volunteer at the mission periodically. So, your thoughts on designating a church or facility as a safe space? What are your thoughts?
I think that's great. Having a facility or even just a room where people, youth, children, like I said, this can be applied to adults, to be able to go in and have, if there's someone, an attendant there they want to speak to, or just to sit in the presence of God. I think that's a fantastic thing to have. It also provides a space for the youth to practice self-care. They don't have that space at home, which is a lot more common, I think, than people realize. It's hard to find a space. As an adult, like I said, I can go lock myself in a closet for 30 minutes and my husband will take care of the kids and I can grab the sound. For a child to do that is a lot more complicated. They may have siblings, oh, I want to play. Having that space available, I think that'd be a huge blessing to those kids and to adults as well.
Yeah, and one of the things is that she did talk about advertising it in the schools, but then she didn't talk about church. So now I'm like going, okay, we need to talk about it in church.
Yeah, one of the biggest things with this program is I wanted it to be able to be implemented in the church, because my focus is on the spiritual and deeper self-care and separation of church and state, all of those issues. It tends to, if we could reach all of the children, that would be my dream come true. But I think there's a deeper level to it when you add in spirituality.
So I'm going to be your question person because I have a lot up here. Why don't you think the church talks about suicide?
So historically speaking, if you look back, suicide used to be considered a sin in I think the majority of denominations. I don't consider it a sin. I think it's very sad. I don't think God welcomes a suicide, and I don't think it's something that He wants for our children or our adults. He doesn't want that for His kids. And like I said, He has equipped us with a very real law for us that I think has largely been ignored because we just assume, love your neighbor as yourself. Oh, well, I love myself, so I'm going to love you exactly the same. But not everybody loves themselves. Not everybody sees their image in the mirror and goes, I'm a beautiful person. I'm going to say the majority of people don't. And I think we missed that over the years. And I think historically with the church thinking it was a sin, I think that's why we veer away from it. We're afraid to bring that subject back up. But I think it's time. I think we've waited long enough, and I think that God is now calling us to push this, to reach our kids. Suicide has been rising with children for the last decade. It's gone up 2% every year for the last decade. And we can argue all day about what that is. I mean, some people think it's technology, some people think it's the overextended school system. I mean, there's so many theories out there and so many studies, and I don't care. I mean, I care what the reasoning is, obviously, but I also know how we can help mitigate that, because in every single situation, it's stress that leads to anxiety, that leads to depression, that leads to suicidal ideation, that leads to success in suicide. If we equipped our kids to understand what stress is, to understand what anxiety is, to understand what depression is, to understand how to regulate their emotions, if we equipped them with that and showed them that Jesus did that, Jesus regulated his own emotions. He regulated the emotions of his disciples. This is, like, he was practicing it in the Bible, and we have largely ignored it. And I think if we were to reach our kids, future generations, their children will be better off. Any other questions?